everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. So good to be back. Last week I was so sick, so sorry about that. But for this week's show, I am chatting with Eric Reitan. I practice it backstage. Reitan. He even said it was okay, but I'm still struggling. I am chatting with Eric about religious philosophy and all of his wonderful books. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us and thank you for welcoming us into your homes. I am looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you are on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or a question. My website is finally back up after 4 months. Don't use Bluehost. I'm just telling you right now. But it's finally back up. So let's give a shout out to our top sponsors. We have Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. Thank you so much for support. If you would like to support me, you can go to my website. That's back up. sherrypalace.com. And there you will find literally dozens of ways to help. And for as little as $3 a month. Thank you in advance. Okay, I appreciate you all. Let's meet our guest and get smarter. Eric Reitan is a professor at Oklahoma State University, specializing in philosophical of what is wrong with me tonight? Specializing in philosophy of religion and ethics. His book defends the value of faith, Christian universalism, and LGBTQ plus equality. His latest book, So Eden Sank, Grieve, is a novel exploring the issues of patriarchy, trauma, and the harms of false certainty. Welcome, Eric. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on. And another Quoir author here. So good to talk to you. Mm-hmm. So what you have written a number of books that just really piqued my interest as far as the theme of them, because that's where I'm at. You know, if it's not about love, then I don't believe it's about God. I think it's man-made, human-made, any way that you want to look at it. Where did you start in this exploration?
Well, okay, that's a long story. It's possible that my journey is a bit different from some of your other guests because I was the child of two preachers' kids, and they
double PK
reacted. They both reacted to their upbringing, and so they were agnostic, basically, different brand of agnostic. And my form of rebellion was to become, when I started college, more religiously conservative.
That's hilarious.
I got involved with a evangelical Christian group on campus. But then, so I had this period of immersion, and then I started balking, and I was backing out fast. But anyway, so
my mom would have loved that rebellion in me.
but in any event, so I'm still, probably faith matters more to me than it ever did, at least in their adult lives, to either of my parents. But I quickly learned when I dove into an evangelical Christian community and started to feel the pressure of what felt like an attempt at brainwashing, that this was not it. This was not what I was looking for, but that there were things there that were what I was looking for. That there was, that there was this God of love that was definitely what I was looking for, and it took some time and various weavings through a journey to find my way. But for me, whatever, a lot of people have stories of deconstruction. For me, the construction part didn't stick very hard. It didn't take
Mm.
before I fled from it and began pursuing other expressions of Christian faith.
I would say it was probably because you were older. You know, you
Probably,
had I mean, you were able to make your own decisions. You were able to see it. So much trauma occurs when it's pushed on children.
yeah, I can only imagine. Well, I mean, I saw that, I think, to some extent with my parents' stories, and especially my
Yeah.
mother's. She was um, she was a Baptist preacher's kid growing up in Scandinavia,
Oh, wow.
very very tiny insular uh, Baptist community. Scandinavia's Lutheran land, and so she experienced both what it was like to be um, singled out and looked at with suspicion because of her religion,
Wow.
and she experienced what it was like to be in a very um, rigid, you've got to believe as we believe or you're damned. Everyone knows what everyone else is doing, and she's the preacher's kid and has got to be perfect um, uh, environment.
Textbook.
Right.
Textbook PK. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, uh, and they moved um, to the United States when my mother was in her early 20s,
Mm.
um, because my grandfather had this vision that he was going to become part of some great awakening
Oh, wow.
revival on the West Coast, right, in California. There was some pastor from the United States who had visited and had said, "Oh, you would be amazing. We need you in America. We're going to lead this." And so he moved the entire family, and they got to the Bay Area and were quickly um, trying to figure out how they were going to eat, right? And,
Oh, wow.
and eventually, he got a posting as the chaplain at the Norwegian Seamen's Mission in San Francisco, and then he eventually got more traditional um, uh, ministerial posts. But for a while, my mother was pretty much supporting the family um, by being a piano teacher
Oh,
in the Bay Area.
wow.
Yeah.
It's striking me that it's kind of like, even though you dabbled in it, like you're the second generation deconstructionist.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, the story of my mother's deconstruction, because she talked a lot more about it than my father, being in the Bay Area was, huge. That she was suddenly out of this insular environment and was going into all sorts of different people's homes and started making friends with people of different faiths. And suddenly she was asking herself, can I really swallow this idea that people who don't believe as I do are going to, burn forever in hell? When if I had been raised a Jew, I would be a Jew today. And if I had been raised a Hindu, I would be a Hindu today, right? So,
Yeah.
so that was, you know, uh, a big part of the story that she told. Um, and I pushed as when I was younger, I pushed back against that, not against the the pluralism so much as well, the way I would put it in conversations with my mother was um, in order to have a rainbow of different colors, you need the different colors. And she was, um, and I was worried that her brand of rebellion was like smearing it all together so it was all a muddy brown. And in order for there to be these distinct bands of colors that could all be celebrated together, there had to be people who adhered to these different ways of life and different ways of engaging with the divine. And I still think that's true, right? I think that it's very tricky to find that space between exclusivist religion that says it all has to be our band of color and that should be the only color that anyone ever sees, and a kind of erasure of the beauty of these different forms of connecting with the divine, the loss of the reality of distinct religious identities in a
I think it's the whole baby and bathwater argument, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to throw out the whole thing, that's fine, but I may say every week at this point that I can't stand Joel Osteen, but even he says some things occasionally that it's like, oh, that was a good thing. You know, we shouldn't. I think a lot of it comes from pain and trauma and hurt and all of that, where we just instinctively go, I don't want to deal with it anymore. It's all bad, because that enables us to not heal. So when we heal, we are able to see the prisms. We are able to see the spectrums and be able to appreciate that, as opposed to holding on to the anger and justifying prejudice is what it is.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit about my sort of background, where I came from in terms of my religious journey, and I kind of settled into. I think of myself as I'm a Universalist Lutheran with a lot of appreciation of the diversity of faith traditions. So that's where I come from. And my first book was a response to the New Atheists. It's called Is God a Delusion, which is a play on Dawkins' The God Delusion. And in that book, well, I mean, the basic birth of that was there was this sort of strident religion is bad, religion is evil, religion is irrational, that was being expressed by this movement in the early 2000s, or the aughts, or the noughties, or whatever that decade was called. But there was this wave of atheist bestsellers, and when I looked at what they were explicitly attacking, I could, in a sense, agree that, yeah, that's bad. But where I differed was they then said that's bad, therefore all religion is bad, right? All theistic religion is bad. All belief in God is bad. And that seemed to me to be just an irrational move that failed to make careful distinctions. And so what I set out to do was to write a book that, in a sense, used the New Atheist as a foil to try to clarify the conditions under which religious belief in general, and theistic religion in particular, could be both morally and intellectually respectable, not harmful and not foolish, right? And so that's what I was doing in that first book, trying to sort of stake out a form of religiosity that just completely sidesteps these new atheist attacks, because it is about hope in the good, right? And it's about living in hope that the good can and will prevail.
I think that religion fails when it's a corporation and it's a clique and those types of things. But again, the whole baby in the bathwater, there's a lot of profound, really good stuff in all religions that enables us to be a more loving human, more kind, more compassionate. And that's what we should hold on to. We can throw everything out that's control, patriarchy, trauma-based, ignorant-based, 2,000 years ago minds, and really be able, I mean, it's discernment, right? It's to be able to say, okay, this is what's good. Keep the good shit, throw out the bad shit, and to stop thinking that it has to be all encompassing. Nothing on this planet is all encompassing. There are spectrums and grays and blacks and whites and everything in between. And when we say it's either good or bad and nothing in between, that's when the trauma starts, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, the absolutizing, right, of well, I mean, for me, a really important part of connecting with truth is recognizing my own fallibility. Because if I don't recognize my own fallibility, then I mistake what I happen to believe with the truth. And so my devotion, instead of being to the truth, is to my beliefs.
And how do you equate truth? What is your measurement for truth?
Well, yeah, defining truth is, you're asking a philosopher. That's very tricky. But if we have just this sense, there's what is the case, and I am part of what is the case, right? But I'm only a part, and I connect with the rest of what is the case, and my connection with the rest of what is the case is imperfect, right? And I want to connect more perfectly, both intellectually, but also with my emotional being and with how I live my life. I want to be in tune with reality. And the trick is to recognize that because I'm fallible, I have room to grow in terms of that attunement, right? And it seems that one of the things that stands in the way of that growth is a worldview that treats error as such a grave threat to one's personal survival, right, one's salvation, that one cannot abide the possibility of error. And so one gropes for false certainty. And when one gropes for that false certainty, one of the ways that you try to protect that sense of false certainty, and hence the sense of safety, is by not allowing different voices and different perspectives to be heard, right?
But isn't that based on an insecurity of beliefs? I mean, if someone were to come to me and say the sky is black right now, I'd be like, that's ridiculous, but tell me why you think of that. So I mean, when you have these types of things where people say, no, this is the way it is, we stop learning. We cease to learn, we cease to grow. I mean, my mom said to me one time, excellence, not perfection. She never embodied that in any way, shape, or form. But it was such a great thing. It was like, okay, I can do my best, but that doesn't mean I have to be perfect. And when we are expected as humans to be perfect, or we elevate other humans to perfection, we're always going to fail. We're going to be insecure about our beliefs. We're going to see all of the stuff that's going on that isn't lining up, the hypocrisies, the lies, all of those things, that we become defensive. And that's when we do shut down. So it's a never ending cycle of okay, I'm just going to say it, of a mind fuck. I couldn't think of another word, but I mean, it really does. It's yours. You suck. You're unworthy. So is everything else. We're better. And it just perpetuates all of this negativity when we should be focusing on love.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think that this kind of mindset is not only a barrier to truth, but to love.
Yeah.
But because if my salvation depends on getting it right, getting my beliefs right, or being with the right community, and then the possibility of being wrong is terrifying. And if the possibility of being wrong is terrifying, I'm going to wall myself off from anything which suggests that I might be, which means that I have to sequester myself with like-minded people who just think as I do, not let anyone doubt or express doubts, at least, not let anyone ask challenging questions, and not let in the opposing perspectives and the differing viewpoints. And so I wall myself off from from anyone who is, fundamentally different in a way that challenges my conviction that I've got it right. All right. So I have to wall myself off. And
you're perfectly describing my mother. I mean, literally on her deathbed, she grabbed my arm in fear that I had never seen in her eyes. And she said, "What if I pick the wrong religion?" She disowned family, friends. She kicked everybody out of her life, for everybody who didn't align to her evangelical beliefs, including me, including my son. And then on her deathbed, totally freaked out and had all that insecurity. And I'm assuring her that she did the right thing and she did the best she can while I wasn't even believing it. And all because she had so believed in this Armageddon revelation, trauma-based fear religion that, again, totally excluded love. There was no love in her foundation whatsoever. It was, this is the way it is, and being around you causes me to sin, is what she used to say.
That's heartbreaking. And that at the end, I mean, almost a kind of breakthrough, a realization of her fallibility, but without that further step of encountering a grace that says it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I told her. You tried your best. You did what you could. I'm sure God will accept you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
see, and that's the thing with religious philosophy, right? When it divides, when it puts everybody into cliques and groups and all of that, I think it loses all of its holiness. I think that's when we start to other people, when we start to divide and conquer, when we start to think that we have to convert everybody, as opposed to just showing them love. I mean, they go like, "Oh no, nothing pisses off social media more than me saying love your neighbor." Oh my God, people get crazy. I won't do it. And it's like, really, people, we've been hearing this for 2,000 years and we still can't get it.
It's so, at once so hard and so easy at the same time. It's just, loving others. It comes so spontaneously in a certain sense. And yet, as soon as, well, I used to do prison workshops. Some organization called the Alternative Violence Project, and we would go in and facilitate these weekend workshops, teaching, nonviolent communication skills, conflict resolution
Nice.
strategies, but most importantly, the spirit of nonviolence. And um, and one of the things that happened in that environment, when we deliberately sort of nurtured a community of acceptance and compassionate attention, where we just modeled paying attention to one another, trying to receive one another, trying to be honest with one another. There was just this joy and playfulness that emerge in these, groups of hardened criminals.
But they've probably never seen that before. Like, they were never taught any of those things.
Yeah, and it was just so, I mean, there was a certain sense in which it was so easy. But one of the things that made it so easy is we left behind the things that divide, right? We didn't, we talked about ourselves. We didn't talk about our politics, right? We shared our perspective, but no one shared the conditions under which you need to meet in order to be saved, right? Those sorts of, and I suspect that if we had thrown out a question like, what do you need to do to be saved? As a gathering question, because we would have these gathering,
it would be divisive everywhere.
It would be divisive everywhere, yeah. And so there's a sense in which it's so easy, and then there's a sense in which there's so much stuff, just sort of in our social, political, and cultural environment that is floating around and latching onto us, that is a source of division, a source of separation. And
I think it's because of identity issues, right? I think that when we look at religion as our identity, as opposed to a goal or a framework for life, that's when people start getting crazy, just like with politics. And when you have a religion that is based on apocalyptic or Armageddon or hell, you get people that justify that. I just saw an interview today, excuse me, with someone that was outside of a Trump rally, and the reporter asked them, what do you want for the Democrats? And he said, send them to the gallows. They're going to end up in hell anyway. And when you have that type of religious philosophy where you can be judgmental, where you can stand on a mountain of piety and say, this is right, that's always going to be divisive. And again, there's no love in any of that. It's a clique. It's nothing more than a high school clique and Mean Girls, in my opinion.
Well, in that first book, Is God a Delusion, towards the end of it, I talk about religion and violence and its relationship to violence. And I make this distinction between, I call it the distinction between religion and religionism. Religion is a way of life, a way of seeing and being in the world. Religionism is the use of particular religious identities to create in-groups and out-groups. Just
like Christian nationalism.
Right, like nationalism, like racism, anti-Semitism. There's you use an identity to create these divisive ideologies that create an us and a them, against whom we define ourselves, and we see our here I'm very influenced by the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, who wrote this amazing little book called Anti-Semite and Jew, in which he offers a kind of psychological portrait of the anti-Semite that is a psychological portrait of the racist, of any person who is in the grip of this kind of divisive ideology. And one of the reasons why this attracts us is, I think there is this deep-seated insecurity. I'm not good enough, but maybe I don't need to be, because maybe I'm judged not by my accomplishments or how I live my life, but by belonging to the right group. Right. And if I belong to the right group, there's got to be a wrong group.
Totally.
Right. And so I mean, that's an oversimplification of Sartre.
Obviously, but I mean, that is the foundation of it.
Yeah. And well, my dogs are now raging in the background. I don't know if
that's okay. But I mean, I think it goes down to people saying, well, I'm a good person, and then they can't look at themselves in the mirror. It's a front, it's a fallacy, it's the epitome of Facebook often. It's like, well, I'm going to present this, but I know who I really am down deep inside, and I know I suck. So I have to be a part of this in order to have any validity whatsoever.
Right. As opposed to a concept of divine love and grace, right? Which
Fix myself, work on it.
Yeah, which says you don't need to be part of the right group, nor do you need to get it right. You just, are precious insofar as you are a person, right?
When I had, hey, David, what's up? When I learned about the Egyptian scales at death, where they measure the heart against a feather, that cracked all of the evangelical beliefs that I was just, horrible for being born. And looking at, are you familiar with that? And
I may have heard it, but why don't you remind me?
So the Egyptians believed that when you died, they weighed your heart against the feather of truth. And if the heart was heavier than the feather of truth, you went to their version of hell. And if it was lighter, then you would go on to their version of heaven. So it took the automatic doom that I was told as an evangelical, and you're born, you suck, you're unworthy, you have all this, to there's still time to get it right. There's still time that I can be a good person and try to be loving and try and do this, even though I've totally screwed up before and did all of these things. It was so freeing for me to release that temple of doom, and say that, I still have time while I'm still alive. I can still make things better. I can still try and do this. It, like I said, it was just so freeing, and that enabled me to say, okay, well, there's still love there. There's still love. And I still believe that there is this enormous, magnificent power of love that we call God out there.
Cool. Yeah.
Are you frozen, or did I silence you?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just, it's in those, conversations have these pause moments, and then everyone realizes, oh, we're all silent. We're all trying to think of what to say next. We hit one of those. So anyway. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I think, this is a theme that runs through all of my work. My first book, it was about, is there religion without religionism, right? And yes, I think there is. It's a way of living in the hope that the universe in some fundamental way is on the side of the good and on the side of love, and choosing to live as if that hope is real and true. And then my second book was a co-authored book that was a defense of Christian universalism, arguing that a doctrine of universal salvation is a better fit with core Christian teachings about God than is the traditional doctrine of hell. And it is actually a very technical book. It's like just heavy with philosophical and theological arguments, and I've been meaning to, and I think will soon, write a more general audiences version of that book. And my third book was about same-sex marriage and the Christian love ethic, and again, I talked about Sartre in that book, and the sort of us-them divides, and how LGBT community has been othered in ways that serve the function of creating this false righteousness, right? At least I'm not one of them, right?
Right.
But also about the importance of looking up from all of our books, including that one, to pay compassionate attention to the neighbor that we're called to love, and to be open to being moved rather than plugging up our ears with Bible verses or whatever it is we.
Right. When I was growing up, there were cartoons where they would go la 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 la.
Right.
And now that's like the foundation of religion. I just can't even with this. I have Arlenden's post up here because I just loved it. It was standing up for ideals in a way that is valuable to people is difficult. And I again simplify it overly by saying, it's insecurity, it's laziness. But I really think that, I've noticed, especially recently, how if I'm not feeling good, I'm not as loving as I am when I'm feeling good. My temper is more exposed. I have a shorter fuse. And that's the way I equate, like, all of us saying, if we are not doing our best, if we're not feeling our best, how can we expect to act our best? A lot of cultural, a lot of society issues in that, but it isn't easy. It isn't, you have to be conscious to say, okay, that person just cut me off. I always use driving because that's my weakness, with the road rage. And I've gotten so much better. I'm no longer calling people horrible, horrible curse names. It's come on, dude. But there's still that issue there. And I have to remind myself, which I always have my bracelet on, love is my religion. Nope. Calm down, Sherry. It's not true. It's not that, don't do that. But our instinctual reactions are that fear, rage. And when people stay in that, we get the society that we're looking at now.
Yeah, well, I would say that we have an instinct towards anger and judgment and the like, but we also have an instinct very deep within us for connection.
Totally.
And the trick is to figure out how to nurture the latter, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's more about nurturing the latter than it is about suppressing the former.
Totally. It goes to the story of the two wolves, the Indian legend of the two wolves. Which wolf are you going to feed?
Yeah.
If we focus, I just had a conversation about one of my launch team members about saying, well, is love perpetual? Can you keep up that type of momentum? And she got me because I was like, well, it's so exhaustive to be loving. And she's like, not if you're in that motion. And it was like, you know what, you're right. Is the momentum of the love gets there. It may be hard to start. It may be hard to recognize where you are fallible and where you need the work, and that can be painful. But once that momentum gets going, it's there. And then you want that feeling more. You want that unity and community and all of that.
And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that when we nurture community, when we build relationships, when we connect, when we communicate, there is a glorious payoff, right? I mean, it's what we're made for, and we feel
Exactly.
it and experience it. Whereas when we go the other way, when we rage and fume and fight and hate and alienate and divide and beat down and indulge our desire to humiliate the person who slighted us. Um, if there's any kind of, there may be a moment of elation, but it's totally ephemeral. It evaporates almost instantly. And we're just left with brokenness, right?
Anger.
And anger and yeah. And so I think that's really, crucial to, just always keep in mind that that the payoff is on the side of love, right? That's where.
Well, and I can say from experience, I mean, they're moving. I moved to California 2 years ago, and the homelessness population here is insane. And I'm always trying to do whatever I can to help. But on Thanksgiving, I cooked for like 9 hours and made a full Thanksgiving dinner, and then loaded my car and went and passed it around the whole neighborhood. And it was the best Thanksgiving of my life. It is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. I know that I made connections that night that I will cherish, and I want that feeling again. Right? I want when you are that high on helping someone else and doing something, and someone says, thank you for just seeing me. That is better than any drug I've ever done. That is better than any experience that's ever out there. And that's what I was saying about talking to my friend. That is the momentum. Once you get a taste of that feeling of someone smiling at you and saying thank you, knowing that you made just even the hour better for them, that's where I want to be now. I used to be, oh, let's get them and stuff like that, because that's the way I was raised in evangelicalism. Now that I'm really focusing on love, that's where I want to feel. That's where I get really full, and nothing can take that away.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the things that divide us, right? And there's the things that connect us. And they're both very human.
Yeah.
And in some ways, all of my books in philosophy of religion have been about that on some deep level. And I think my current book that just came out is also about that, but in approaching it in a very different way. It's a work of fiction, and in a sense, it kind of surprised me that it became about that, because when I started to write it, I had written this this parable for my philosophy of religion blog that was really about suppose a bunch of people wake up in a spaceship with no memory of how they got there, and there's all kinds of things in this spaceship, but no sign of its makers, alien or human, and people start having visions, right? And some of the people have visions of a Earth being destroyed. Some of them interpret those visions as being about that the aliens have destroyed the Earth and now they've abducted this last vestige. Others are saying, no, they're our rescuers, right? And it was intended to sort of explore, well, how do you decide what to believe in the face of uncertainty?
Yeah.
Right? You don't have enough information, right? But you have to make some decisions about how you're going to live, right, in this new environment, and who you're going to interact with and how, and and to make those decisions, right, you need to form some kind of tentative fallibilistic beliefs based on the information you have. And how do you do that, right? So that was what I was originally doing. But when I looked at it, I said, there's really a novel here. And I started writing the novel, and it immediately became a Garden of Eden story. I don't know exactly quite how that happened. Well, I do. I'm a pantser when I write fiction. I just write by the seat of my pants as opposed to plotting. And I had someone waking up, and initially they were waking up, and it was a Star Trek like spaceship, and I was like, no, that feels sterile. That feels wrong. So then I went back and I started again, and this kid wakes up with his face in the dirt, and I'm like, dirt. Why is there dirt? So suddenly it became this greenhouse in space, right? This
Oh,
vast
wow.
greenhouse in space. Um, and then he woke up and started looking around, and there's lush jungle all around, right? And then he meets someone. Who does he meet, right? Well, it's a young woman. He's a young man at his own age. And then I go back and I write her waking up story, and then I have these two young people in this space garden, and they woke up without any clothes on, so they're Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's an Adam and Eve story. I didn't actually realize that it was a Garden of Eden story until I was getting close to the end of the first draft.
The beauty of writing.
Right. But when I was writing this, I still had this idea that, there's going to be, they have no memory of how they got there. They're having visions. There's going to be these other people. They have different ideas about what the visions mean. But it very quickly became about human conflict and connection, right? It just gravitated into this story about how these different perspectives on what is going on and what it all means, and the false certainty that some people had about what it all means, right? Drove escalating conflict in this community. And so there was this, in a sense, opportunity for humanity to start again in this new Garden of Eden. And they shoot it all to hell by, reclaiming all of the crap that, the us that divides and all of this that defined us back on Earth, right? But with, some measure of hope, of course, right? Because,
of course.
Right. Yeah. And I won't, share how the story ends, but it's.
Don't do that, because
dead bodies.
Everybody needs to go buy it to get that.
There are a few dead bodies, but not a pile.
Okay. Well, I think every fiction has to have at least one dead body, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's several, or it's better to say. The story ends with hope, right?
Very good.
Yeah. So
I think we all need that at any point, especially in today's day and age. It can be quite overwhelming with people. I mean, I guess the certainty, I think you really hit on something about the certainty and people believing that what they know is certain. My gauge for truth is it must be true in all eras, all countries, what's true for me has to be true for the people in the Amazon and all of those things. And most religions don't measure up to that. Most religions have a single follower or a single messenger that we're supposed to follow, and have downgraded to these cliques and these exclusive things that so many of its messengers said, no, don't do this, be more communal. And because of that certainty is how we all fail. There was a time where someone telling me that I was wrong would have been earth shattering to me. Now, hearing that I'm wrong, it literally makes me pull in and go, really, why? Where am I wrong? What's going on? Because that's an opportunity for me to learn. There's no longer an ego issue there of going, oh my God. Now, granted, there are times when someone goes, no, this is wrong. And I feel it in me and go, oh God, because I feel stupid. But I've accepted my fallibility. I have accepted that we are only human and we can only conceive of things within our own perceptions and all of that. So when we add a God figure to these beliefs that says exclude everybody, that's where we get all of the stuff that makes the philosophies just bleed as opposed to flourish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, God clearly transcends, if God is the truth, the ultimate reality, God transcends all our finite human capacities, right? And yet, if we're all creatures of God, we are connected to the truth about God, right? So we're all connected to this truth that transcends our finite cognitive grasp, right?
Exactly.
And that's our situation. So we're going to seize on some aspect of that truth and miss other aspects of that truth. And we're we are creatures who also understand our experience through a filter of concepts and categories that are to some extent socially and culturally learned. Some of them may be sort of built into our hardwiring. I don't know. And there's a debate about that, right? Kant thought that there were these basic concepts, these categories of the understanding that were universal to all persons, but there are also clearly many concepts and categories that are culturally defined, and they impact what we can experience and what we can't experience. Here's a very simple example. Years ago, I was a graduate student and I was at a conference on categories of all things. Right? And I sat in, I don't know why, but I sat in on this conference about linguistic categories, or specifically phonemes. And these phonemes are these sort of units of sound, and the presenter had us listen to 10 sounds that were computer generated, and what all of us heard was a P sound 5 times and then a B sound 5 times. So we just heard pa 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 ba 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 ba, right? At that point, the presenter explained that the difference between a p and a b is the interval of time between the popping of the lips and the onset of vocalization.
Oh, wow.
Right. And these 10 sounds, each one shortened that interval by an equal amount 10 times. Right. So it was 10 distinct sounds that were produced. Right.
Wow.
10 distinct sounds, each one just started out with a p with like an increment of I don't know how long, and then incrementally just a little bit shorter time between the and the onset of vocalization. And so we all heard 2 sounds, right? Because we only had 2 phonemes, right? We had been culturally trained to put sounds of this sort into either this box or that box, right? Just this box or that box. And that not only affected what we did with our experience, it affected what we experienced. And it actually impacted the content of our subjective experience. I only heard 2 sounds.
Wow.
Right? And someone who came from a culture where there were 3 phonemes over that range of sounds would have heard 3 sounds. And they would have heard 3 distinct sounds, right?
Our brain is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. But it's evidence that our conceptual categories shape what we experience, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, our perception is reality, right? We've known that forever.
right. So presented with the same stimuli, the same external reality, right? People with different concepts, different conceptual categories will experience that reality differently. They will assimilate that stimulus in a different way that will lead to a different subjective experience. And we have to be aware of that fact.
Well, I mean, science for years told us that we knew everything, and we are just now hearing the voices of animals beyond our perception, beyond anything that we could do. They can communicate for hundreds of miles and can do so focused that it's beyond anything we can do. But because we didn't know about it, because we couldn't hear it, it didn't exist. And we do that with all aspects of our lives. We compartmentalize everything, saying, well, if I believe it, it's true. If I can see it, it's true, and go from there. I think we really just need to get over ourselves and be like, okay, I'm learning, I can do this. That's what this whole human experience is supposed to be about.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's part of, human nature that we are categorizing and conceptualizing beings. And so in our ordinary day-to-day experience, we will receive the world in this conceptually organized way. It comes to us shaped by our concepts and categories. And not everyone shapes things using the same concepts and categories. And I think the same is true of the divine, right?
Yeah.
That the divine as it is in itself transcends us. I receive the divine through concepts and categories that affect my experience of the divine.
Totally.
But just like if I never met anyone who heard 3 phonemes where I hear 2, I might never suspect that there were 10 distinct sounds.
I love that.
Right. And encountering someone who organizes experience in a different way opens me up to the possibility that the reality transcends what either of us experience, right?
And that's pure beauty. That's pure beauty right there.
Yeah. So I think we need to be open to people who experience things differently if we want to get closer to the truth, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I think that I could talk to you for a couple more, but we have to cut it short. I have some promos for you. Where's my screen? Hey, Tim, good to see you. There is your website, which I love the URL, the piety that lies between.
That actually is a line from Plutarch. He talked about religion and superstition. You distinguish between religions and superstition. I sort of think of it as religion is a relationship with God, which is like the relationship one has with a loving partner. And for him, superstition is the relationship that an abused spouse has with their abuser. And even back in the ancient world, he saw a lot of things that went by the name of religion that was people trying to please and appease an abusive power that they walked around on eggshells in the face of, right? And he called that superstition. but he said a lot of people reject superstition by leaping straight to atheism, and they forget the piety that lies between. So that's where that
I love it.
Yeah.
When nothing is blind, absolutism doesn't exist. And then so Eden Sank to Grieve, available at Amazon now. Be sure to look for this cover. Go buy it. Go buy it. Eric, it was so great chatting with you. Any final words, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find me occasionally, not as much as I used to, but occasionally blogging on that, The Piety Lies Between. I'm on Facebook. I'm on the social media site formerly known as Twitter.
Always be Twitter to me.
Yeah. At Reitan66.
And I'll put all of your links and social media links on the descriptions in YouTube and all of that.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you so very much for coming. We are going to head to the VIP for those who are members. Eric, I'll see you backstage. Thanks again.
All
It's
right.
been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Another great show. I told Eric before the show that I could talk about this for hours. This was right up my league. And I really want people to reevaluate their beliefs if it is affecting division or supremacy or any of those things, because we are all in this together. And God doesn't have any favorite children. We are all God's children. Okay. Next week, we are having another great show. We are going to be discussing rejecting societal norms for things that prohibit you from living your best life. So we're going to be talking about that. I can't wait. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week. Have a wonderful week. And as always, walk in love. Mwah! See you soon.